Okay, there we go. Finally, I apologize and thanks for the patience on that. All right, we are now live. Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming in tonight and watching. We are here tonight with Collin Armstrong, debut author of Polybius. Thank you so much for taking this on tonight and coming to talk to us.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. Very exciting.
Go. Oops. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Okay, sorry for the echo, everyone. We are officially live, yeah.
I mean,
So
it's on point with technology doing things it shouldn't. So that's fine.
exactly.
Yeah,
Hey, I'm just
works.
glad we're here and it's working. All right. So I have some like conversation topics to kind of get us started here. I will be watching your comments as well if anyone has any questions along the way, but we'll get to those at the end. But feel free to drop anything you want to mention to Colin or I and any questions you may have about Polybius. But yeah. I'm going to start with just kind of like the bare bones. Obviously, one of the reasons I picked up your title from the advanced reader copy was because I recognized Polybius as, somebody who kind of grew up on the internet. You hear about like all of the, creepy pastas and all the different stories and the urban legends and myths that kind of came up out of our first time being interconnected with the rest of the weird world. Um, so it definitely like caught my eye. I guess the basic question, which I'm sure you've been asked before, is what inspired you to base it on Polybius? When did you first stumble across it, and what made you kind of want to dive into that story?
Sure. So I'll start with kind of explaining like how I came to know about it, which is very simple. As you said, I found it online. This was in preparing to do interviews and questionnaires and things I've been doing leading up to the release of the book. I've been going back and looking at old development materials, and I had a file folder on it from 2006. So it's been an idea that I have lived with for a really long time. And I knew right away the combination of elements, they were all just things that appealed to me. Like that particular moment in time, kind of the early 1980s, golden age of arcades. Like I was too young to be there for that. I was sort of there at the tail end of the arcade experience, like in the early 90s when it was kind of shifting into something different. But I responded right away to kind of that world, the concept of, like what would probably be teenagers exploring this supernatural mystery. I also grew up on Scooby-Doo, so there's probably something there. But I, had also for a long time been looking for a way to tell like a kind of a dark coming of age story. I grew up on a lot of books that sort of used that, like a lot of horror that will use kind of coming of age story as a jumping off point to sort of confront the characters with like monstrously exaggerated versions of the challenges they're going to face later in life. I always thought that was a really interesting way to approach that. And I thought that Polybius, kind of the overarching legend, could work for that. As I was saying, though, that was 2006. It took a very long time for me to figure out the right approach. And for, all the time I've been working professionally as a writer up to now, I've been working in film and television and branded content. So I wasn't trying to write a book. So I first developed it as a feature film pitch. I was never able to quite get it where it needed to be, I think, in order for it to connect with people the way that the manuscript was able to and was able to move forward. I had gone back to it at one point in time. I was going to try to do it as an epistolary online where I was going to pose as someone who had been exposed to the game, but was now like telling his story. And I just kind of couldn't kind of find the right mix of elements. And when I decided to try my hand at this style of writing, it clicked and made sense very quickly that this was it obviously is different in a lot of material ways, but this was something like Carrie or like John Saul's Creature, where you use, again, like the issues that, kind of you're facing as a younger person. And in the case of Polybius, there are issues to do with culture and technology and other things that are explored. But to use that as a way to, again, the kind of like amplify the kind of the horror of growing up. Growing up is kind of horrifying. It's unknown, right? Like you don't know what you're going to become or where you're going to end up, and that's always scary.
Yeah, that that definitely sums up like exactly my experience in reading it. One of the things that I wanted to touch on was like we're seeing a lot of novels in the book world in sort of this emerging genre that doesn't really have a name yet, where it's new adult, it's books written for adults, but it's talking about coming of age, and it's definitely falls into that category where it's sort of bridging the gap between people around my age in their 20s, between the college age into the adult experience. And it's very like, especially with that nostalgia factor, it really grips you, and it really, really works with that coming of age genre in there. Um, Another part of this is the fact that I got a almost like a thriller vibe from it. Obviously it's sci-fi horror, but it's that page turning, that flipping, that sort of like really gets you and makes you want to tear through it. Like the one of the only things off the top of my head that really fits that category and does well with like page turners are things like Jurassic Park or anything in that sort of like genre. And it's really hard to hit it, but I really think that you nailed it with this one. It's really good.
Thank you.
Um,
That's
yeah.
incredible. I appreciate that.
For sure. And you were also talking about your experience with screenwriting. Another title that kind of comes to mind that had almost like a similar journey was Lovecraft Country, which, yeah, was written, meant to be a TV show, didn't take off, got turned into a book, and then it kind of like went backwards and became
Yeah.
a show. Yeah. Which sort of leads me to my next question is, would you want this to come to the screen in some form or way?
I mean, sure, like that, I can't talk about it too much. It is something we're working on. You never
Okay.
know. I've been doing this long enough to know that it's impossible to predict where things are going, especially right now. It's real crazy in the entertainment industry right now. But yeah, I mean, that's always kind of, like how I had seen it. And like one of the things I think that would be interesting in, trying to move it into a different medium now is the economy of screenwriting is really brutal. You have, 110 pages to unpack your concept, build out the players, tell this story, and especially when you start dealing with high concept ideas like this, where the concept itself, it's not just two people in a relationship trying to figure out whether or not they should stay together. It's like, I'm not denigrating that type of a story. All I'm saying is like at a base level, it's very simple and the emotions are very complex. Here, you're dealing with a complex, like central idea that you have to spend some time exploring. And then you also have to figure out a way to kind of transform your characters into not just sort of ciphers for information about this scenario, but into real people that you care about. That's very hard to do. And it's a reason why most movies aren't that good. And the ones that are really good are sort of universally beloved. So for the book, the ability to just live inside these people's heads and explore who they were was so gratifying and so very different. And I think it might provide a roadmap for a writer to figure out like here's some ways I could shorthand these characters into becoming more kind of fleshed out on the screen. And I mean, obviously the performance, the direction, like it all comes together to either sell the illusion or not. But the ability to have like taken the time to get to know them that way was so cool and not something I had previously really been able to do. You do a lot of pre-writing in Screed, or at least I do. Like everybody has a different process, but like I will spend a lot of time kind of building out bios on characters and doing like kind of world building exercises to help me sort of think about them. But once you get started, it can be easy to lose track of that stuff. And you have certain, like there are things you have to hit, and like things need to be happening at certain points in time. And yeah, the freedom of this form was really fascinating and really kind of empowering as a writer.
I can definitely understand that. With freedom, though, comes, and this kind of leads into one of my other questions here, is this is a question I always like to ask each author is, was there anything you had to cut from your novel that you would like to share? And so you were kind of talking about your process and building up each character and, with anything that comes with like trimming the fat as well. So I'm curious, was there anything that you wish could have stayed in that wasn't
I
able
mean,
to?
everything that got cut, like now I do have things I really liked, and I will talk to you about those because if there's anybody out there listening, I want you to know they were in the world and they were cool. But no, like it was, I think the first draft that I like, had handed over to my agent was like 460 pages. And this is considerably shorter than that. I don't actually know the page count of the book. I'm sorry. That seems like something I ought to know. So a lot of material did get cut. There was one character in particular, though, who I had a hard time figuring out initially, and then once I knew who he was so fun to write and really interesting. Is Mal, and Mal is the owner of the arcade in this little coastal town in California where this Polybius cabinet turns up. And Mal is kind of envisions himself as like the kingpin of this little, really kind of middle of relative nowhere seaside town. He thinks that he's a criminal, but he's just kind of this wannabe middle-aged loser who has never really been able to like do very much with his life and can't appreciate the things that he has. So with the way, and without going into spoiler territory, just with the way the game works, when he is exposed to it, it kind of unlocks this ability for him to become the thing he's always imagined he was going to be. He becomes the worst possible person. He's really the animus for the game. Like the game, in a sense, or even the very concept, the existence of the game is sort of the central villain in the story, but it manifests like most clearly in Mal. Whereas everybody else, when they play this, and they're kind of horrified by what it's doing to them, or can't even make sense out of it. They're so disassociated with who they were, they no longer really have a sense of self. For Mal, it's incredibly empowering. So once I kind of had a handle on him, like I just kept writing him, and there was a whole chapter toward the back end of the book where he like robs the bank in town, and it was written, it was just tons of action, and like it was him kind of just being this complete psychopath. It was really interesting to just to have that time to spend with him, but I realized, and this is a credit to my manager who I worked with very closely on that first draft. He said like you could do this in a scene. It's like this is cool, but like we don't care about him that much. Like we do need to care about him, but it's like this isn't really changing our perception of him anyway. So it became instead he just robbed somebody on the street. Someone else has already done the busy work of robbing the bank, and Mal, being the complete jerk that he is going to be like, oh, that's a lot easier, and that just takes the money off this person. I was like, it was a better solution, but I did love that scene. And there were other bits with him too that got cut, just because again, like I kept writing him. And like that was kind of interesting with, becoming comfortable with kind of those darker elements of these characters. Because again, like not to say screenwriting is superficial, but with less time, there's less opportunity to dig. And when you're really trying to dig into somebody's thoughts and illustrate the thought process of someone who's doing something horrible, it's uncomfortable. It took me a while to sort of, become okay with this and to figure out like, well, that this is just all kind of like interpreting, I'm sure, decades of my life of kind of external experiences, and it's coming out through this guy. Once I figured that out, it was again like it was really interesting to write him, but it took me a while to be okay with some of the things that were happening in the book, just because I think I hadn't ever really allowed my thoughts to go past maybe two or three steps of why something was happening. Here, you're really deep into somebody's brain, which is strange.
Yeah, I can definitely understand that. I can definitely like see it in your writing. in a way that I feel like your screenwriting positively impacted the book. Like I said, it gave it like a thriller pace without, but also you still get to dive into those characters and you can see them really developing, and it's really a great recipe for a sci-fi horror novel like this, which is it's why I enjoyed it so much, and I feel like our readers will as well. It's yeah. I guess. Ooh, one other thing that I wanted to talk about, um, we're kind of on the tail end of it. It's not as prevalent as it was, but sort of the 1980s nostalgia boom, like
Mhm.
that we're sort of kind of still in. It was more like I'd say the peak was like, Stranger Things was obviously the most
Yeah,
popular for
which,
quite a
by the
while.
way, is when I was initially pitching the script, was back then.
Uh,
So it's like catching it right at the very now. It's like 90s and 2000s are hip now. I don't know. So anyway, sorry.
Oh no, I completely understand that. And it's sort of even with that, I really feel like it holds its own despite like the deluge of what we have of 1980s nostalgia. Um, when I was researching for this and also when I was reading the book, it occurred to me I was like, there are so many different myths and so many different legends and out there, whether they're modern or classic. I haven't really come across a story about Polybius until now. Like I really do think this is something that is original when it comes to that myth. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I did not find anything. This is like a completely unique take on really fleshing out that myth. So,
And I think that was also something else I knew pretty early on was that I wanted to tell like the origin story for the legend. I didn't want it to be people in the present sort of investigating the past, which can be interesting, but was not what I wanted to do here. Like I wanted to be in that moment. I mean, look, you are correct in that at the time it was very on trend to be kind of mining 80s nostalgia. And I'm sure that played a part in it too. It's in the calculus of like, how are you going to do this? It's like there's always things like that that you're weighing off where it's like, well, there were just like eight heist movies, so you can't do you know what I mean? It's like you do pay attention to that kind of stuff. So anyway, um, for the for the that concept of like where did the legend come from? I wanted to sort of and why are there parts of it we don't know about? Right? Like there's only these like kernels of information that have been like the core story of Polybius. Like over time, I do know that it's been the subject of other media, but like I don't think any of it has influenced what those initial details are that were laid out on to the best of my knowledge, a website called coinop.org, which was like an IMDb for coin op games and still exists and is like just gloriously kind of early 2000s internet in appearance still. It's great. You just go like look at it and appreciate that like, very simple aesthetic. But anyway, yeah, most of the details, the concept of like Sinislock and being this mysterious company that no one had ever heard of that produced this game, the game causing, like kind of addictive behavior and aggression and disassociation and self-harm in its players, the concept of kind of men in black coming in and plugging cables into the game and stealing some sort of data from it, like who knows? All of that was there, right kind of from the jump. So, I knew I was going to have to add details to it. And I am somebody who I spend, even though I don't think it's anything I could ever go about writing myself, I spend a lot of time reading about and listening to and just kind of trying to wrap my head around politics. Specifically, I have a weird fascination with Watergate. I've read, I don't know, probably a dozen books at this point in time, and it's just something that has all. And I think, I mean, I think it has a real bearing on life even today. But so to that end, the idea of it becoming like there being this kind of a veil of almost like a government conspiracy or whatever, I think the Men in Black were a nice line into something like a little bit deeper that allowed me to explore kind of an idea that falls into a bucket that I love to draw from. I think that stuff's interesting, and I think it kind of helps ground it too, because we live in a world where I think we all just assume and accept a certain amount of kind of corruption and malfeasance in politics. So I think like that is immediately something that keeps you in the realm of possibility.
Yeah, I was just about to say that as well. Like it definitely gave it such a great degree of believability. Oh, I'm trying to think of the phrase. It'll come to me later. But anyway, made it so believable, and really helped me like immerse myself in this novel and like really believe that that could be possible with a video game. Um, let's see here. Uh, Ooh, also one last thing about the origins of Polybius. There was one other thing I noticed when I was, doing research and such. Um, the setting, I believe, was actually originating
Or,
in Oregon. But
yeah.
yeah, yeah. Was there like any particular reason for a setting change?
I've never been to Portland for one thing. I've spent a fair amount of time in Sonoma, which is kind of just north of San Francisco, and is sort of where I imagined the story taking place for a number of reasons. But really it was mostly because I was familiar with that area, but also too like I am probably above all else like a movie buff. And there's a subset of films that I have like a weird, deep appreciation for that are shot or were shot in that area, like John Carpenter's The Fog. The Birds was shot. That was shot in Point Reyes primarily, and then Hitchcock's The Birds was shot in Bodega Bay. And those were kind of the towns I was modeling Tasker Bay after. And back then, that was still a nice area, but they were beach towns. They were like little seaside towns. Now they're still that, but the key to entry is, one that most people will never possess because of just, the location and everything else. It's an ideal place. It's just beautiful. So I liked that as I felt like that would give me a lot of opportunity to develop the place. Whereas with Portland, it's a city. You could do it in a suburb, but there was also something about that where I felt like I'm from a small town, and I do think I wanted to look a little bit at what life is like or what my perception of life is like in a small town. And that also kind of enabled me to explore something that I thought might work a little bit better. And the way the game works, like if you've played it and you're exhibiting these symptoms, and I haven't, but I am going to be in proximity with you, just either by virtue of the fact that it's a small town or maybe we know each other or whatever, your behavior is going to start to lever me up. And that's really how the game works. Like, not everybody has to play it, just enough people to make everyone else start to feel uneasy. And that's where kind of you get this gradual, like pot boiling on the stove or whatever. That's eventually gonna burst. So that was kind of the some of the logic behind the choice of setting.
That makes sense. Yeah, it definitely gives it a like a bubbled effect of this being, you're sort of trapped in this area, especially
You're
towards
literally
the
trapped by
middle
the
end.
end.
Yeah,
So
yeah. I
yeah,
was like, without
yeah.
spoiling it, you can definitely feel that towards the end, for sure. Let's see here. Ooh, did you have any plans for a continuation of this particular story? I really like found wanting to know more about like Andy and Roman especially, and I have a feeling other readers will as well, like want to what happens next to these characters.
Sure. So I mean, in a perfect world, I have a concept for a second and a third book, and each one jumps forward a little bit in time. The second book would be set in the mid '90s, kind of at the advent of like broad access to the internet, where obviously this exists as a file, so that really changes like what's possible within it. Andy would be a part of this. Like at least the way all of this is formulated right now. This just might all be, for naught, but I imagine she's, if we're in the '90s, she's kind of like at the tail end of her 20s, and her life has obviously been, kind of deeply colored by this. And I think, in and you know, things go sideways in a number of interesting ways. But in what would be the third installment of the story, it would be the present. She would be however old she's going to be. She will have a daughter of her own. She will have, kind of made the mistakes that all parents make that I'm learning about making and learning about how to navigate and forgive yourself for and reconcile with. And I think to watch her go from that teenager to this, like adult with a full life would be really fascinating. Hopefully there's a chance for that. We'll see.
Yeah, I hope so too. I'm definitely looking forward to that. I would love to, hear more about their story. Um, Outside of Polybius, though, did you have ideas for other works?
Yeah, I have some proposals that are out right now, which I can't say too much about, but I can say are tethered to concepts of folklore, urban legend, myth, superstition, things like that. So I feel like it's urban legends. I think, it's often said are reactions to sort of changes in culture. And I think that like if you can identify something that's happening, and figure out kind of why it's happening within a story. I think there's a lot of rich dramatic and thematic opportunities within those anyway. But that so those are out in the world, and we're kind of working to try to make one of those a reality. And then I am still writing, not actively on like a show or anything like that, but I am working on a feature script with a producer and a director that is a contained action thriller. So all none of that may come to pass. It might end up being something totally different. You never know. But that's kind of what's out there right now. And I just started another proposal today because I need something to do. It's very weird. Today was real weird. Like I've been doing all this stuff and like doing all this social media stuff to get ready for the book to come out. And now that it's out, it's like, oh, what do you do? No one told me what I do after it comes out. So I just like hang out? Like what else? So I have to be doing something. It was very weird to wake up today though and be like, well, nothing else to do, like it's out there.
I mean, I would say right now, especially for those of us who have read it or, will read it eventually. Like the what to do now is like tell other people about it. This book is really good, and it's definitely on one of my favorites on the shelf now. You were like I said before, you really hit the nail on the head with this one, and I'm excited to see what you do next and to see how our readers respond to this one as well. Let's see here if we have any comments. Yeah, if anyone watching does have any questions here, we will take those. And let's see here if I had any other talking points while we wait on that. Um,
I was going to say something that you had brought, and this is, I'm not running with this comparison, but the comparison to something like a Jurassic Park,
mm,
only in the sense that like what in my mind, this was always like kind of it was my writing like an 80s mass market paperback. I want it to be like where you go into a used bookstore and it's $1 and you're like, the cover's kind of cool and you take it home, you're like, this is amazing. Like that's really what I wanted. I wanted it to feel like one of those, and I wanted it to have that effect of kind of hopefully surprising you, like where it kind of took you. So it's heartening to hear. Obviously, Jurassic Park is a step above all of that, but it was yeah, like it's I think it has things to say. It is not a book that was written to with the intent of changing the world. I want it to be something that you take to the beach that you have fun with. That is, like a compelling read that you get through fast, and after you're done, you're like, that was a blast. That's really what I want. So that's awesome.
yeah, yeah, I definitely got that feeling of the mass market paperback fun read for sure. I guess that analogy I was drawing was more of like having a thriller genre with a very, very strong sci-fi element is really hard to
Hmm.
come by. And, there are very few that I've found that make it work. This one makes it work. And it again lends to that level of believability. If you tear it down to bare bones, you can say, oh, this video game is making people crazy. Doesn't sound very believable, but it is, and it does work. And yeah, I think it's going to be really gripping for our readers as well. But yeah, I had a plan here for the last 15 minutes. If anyone had any questions at all, I do see we have some folks watching right now. Um, oh, There was one other thing I didn't touch on before when I mentioned Lovecraft Country. Both of your, when your books side by side, obviously they're vastly different, wildly different. But I notice it's sort of like an inverse of each other. It's a book intended to be a show, and yours is a book influenced by show writing. And I thought that was like very fascinating how you talked about like diving into depth into the characters. And you see some similar things in Lovecraft Country as well, where it has that page turning flip thriller feel to it because it has that influence of screenwriting, and I think that's very interesting how those two were able to like merge so perfectly in that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it does teach you to like find like the moments that really, kind of punch through or whatever. And you can kind of build if you have enough of those, you can build around them and kind of keep, I think, like pace up. And that was, like we were talking about before, that initial draft of the book was, 460, I think 462 pages. And I think, the pacing just improved markedly from like that to what it is now. 'Cause there were two entire characters who were cut, and then addition to like some, like longer form scenes, like the one I was describing with Mal. So yeah, a lot got cut, and I'm sure it all went to keeping the pacing, the tempo more aggressive.
Oh yeah, for sure, and it definitely worked. But yeah, did you have any like final things you wanted to share or anything you'd like to say tonight?
I really, if you are a fan of kind of 80s horror and that type of a vibe, like I think that this is the book for you. I think it, is I like I said, I think it has some things to say. Polybius is weird in that the legend is set in the early 1980s. It sort of came to life seemingly in the late 1990s, but I think it has so much to say about our relationship with technology today. In the sense that it, again, I don't want to give too much away, but with the way that the game affects you and what it can do to you and what it can make you do, it has a lot to say about what technology I think is doing to us in a lot of ways right now. And so I think it's weirdly timely, even though it's, as far as urban legends go, I guess it's kind of a classic now, right? It's a classic for our generation at least, or more so for yours. I'm about twice as old as you. That's like something that you grew up with. If you're into, and kids are always hip to this stuff. So like if you're into these things, um, Polybius has always been there, and that's really cool. I grew up with like scary stories to tell in the dark and things like that. All the classics, The Hook and Headlights and things like those. Those were the ones I grew up with, and Polybius was something that I came to later on. But yeah, I think it's endured for a reason. And like we were discussing before, I think it's that particular urban legend has something to say about the way that technology can affect us if we're not careful.
For sure, yeah, totally agree. I really appreciate you coming and talking with me tonight.
Yeah,
Um, I'll definitely send you along if any viewers after the fact, after it's posted, have any questions. I'll
yeah,
forward those
please.
along. Yeah, yeah, for sure. Thank you. But yeah, if you would like to order a copy of Polybius, we do have signed editions in store. You can also order online if you'd like. You can go to bookloft.com, just place in the order comments that you want a signed copy, and I'll make sure that you get one. Thanks again for talking tonight, Colin. I really had so much
Yeah,
fun with it. Yeah.
thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity. And next time I am home, which I'm from kind of the tri-state area, not too far away, I will come to Columbus because I would love to see the shop. It looks amazing. So
Thank you. We'll look forward to it. Thank you,
thanks.
everybody, and thanks for watching. You have a great night.